Hello, I'm Phil Race from the Java Client desktop team, and with me today is Kevin Rushforth, and we both work in this group in the Oracle JDK development group, and we're going to be talking to you today about how you would build and deploy Java desktop client applications using the latest versions of JDK 17 and beyond. So without further ado, let me move on to our agenda for today. So the first question is why a desktop application? And then we'll move on to a very quick, very high level overview of the JavaFX and Swing APIs. We'll then switch to a demo of an email client application. We'll walk through showing how the UI was built. We'll show how to deploy that, how to build the deployment package and deploy it. And time permitting, we'll have another look at the demo again, and then we'll summarize what we've talked about. So the first question is why a desktop application these days? Well, there are multiple possible reasons, and one is to access desktop features not easily delivered in a browser. For instance, you can have multiple windows, you can deal with multiple screens, you've got a better experience with OS and desktop integration. And you guys are our target developers, are our target audience for this talk, and it actually can give you a better development experience as well in terms of maintainability of the software you develop, stability, control over the execution platform, and the ability to use platform libraries, which could include native code via the Java's JNI interface, and in the future, Project Panama, which will allow easier access to native libraries. And not just for you, but for the user, your user. They will hopefully experience the performance and responsiveness that you get with a desktop application, and that it's very easy to access that straight from the desktop. So let's look at Swing and JavaFX as UI toolkits. First, just as a way of clarification, I want to say when I say or write Swing, we don't just mean the Swing UI toolkit with buttons and sliders. We also mean Java 2D, which does the graphics part of it, AWT, which does all of the desktop integration and window management. So the whole enchilada of all of the libraries that are part of OpenJDK and Java SE. It's just so Swing is a simple shorthand here. So from a distance, there's a lot of similarity between Swing and FX. Let's see, both offer a pretty comprehensive set of user interface controls. You know, you have all the things you'd expect: event handling, drag and drop, clipboard support, window management. You can customize how these UI controls are rendered. Both of these APIs have graphics primitives, 2D geometry, transformations, both support printing, and to continue on. Both under the covers make use of the appropriate hardware acceleration for the platform. That would be like Direct3D on Windows, Metal on Mac, or OpenGL on macOS. Both are high performance, not just because of that, but because of plenty of tuning of the code itself and the high performance of the Java JIT, the VM that's underlying everything. Both support a variety of layout managers, sufficient for most applications, and it's important for certain markets, support technologies such as accessibility, internationalization, and localization. And both can be developed using your preferred IDE, whether that be IDEA, Eclipse, NetBeans, etc. But as well as the similarities, there are some unique features or greater strengths of one versus the other. So if it's important to you, Swing is bundled with OpenJDK, being part of the Java SE platform, whereas JavaFX isn't, but has some 3D support. Swing components are easier to subclass, but with CSS, it's easier to style FX components. Swing has richer text and imaging APIs. JavaFX, on the other hand, has built-in charting. It supports media with integrated audio, video, web, animation, effects, etc. And so if you're going to build a desktop application, which one of these do you choose? Well, the good news is they can be used together. So it's not an either-or choice. You can use both. They can work seamlessly in the same application, even in the same window. So you can nest Swing within JavaFX and vice versa. And then you can interoperate between the two of them to create a first-class desktop application. So let's talk about our demo. This is the user interface for an email client application, which we're going to call JMail. It uses both Swing and JavaFX, showcasing both of them. And the focus here is on being a first-class desktop application. So although we have, the ability to do fancy graphics and effects coming out of the wazoo, we're not going to be showing that today. This is about, you can add that to your application if you want, but we're just going to focus on how to make the application. And this is not using any secret source. It's just using the public APIs available in at least JDK 17 and JavaFX 17 and later, and most of this could be done with much earlier versions. And we're going to show how it's installed using a platform installer created by the JDK's built-in JPackage tool. And a very important disclaimer, what we're trying to demo here is how you build a UI for a desktop application. This demo doesn't connect to an email server. It can't send email, it can't receive email, and all the email data you'll see is statics, just so we can kind of demo the UI part of it. Okay, let me exit this for the moment. And hopefully everyone can see my desktop. I'm on a Mac here right now. This would work on Windows too, but we pre-built using JPackage a DMG standard Mac OS installer. And just like any Mac OS application, I can drag that into my applications folder, and then I can launch it from there. This is a Java application, and we saw what we call a splash screen come up, which is, and then fade out, which I'll talk about in a bit. And now we have the main application window up. And you'll see a few things, right? We have the option to do notifications. I'll come back to that in a moment. We have the About button. We have action, should I say, where the user can do response to common desktop operations. And somewhere down here, there we are, in the dock, we have the Gmail application where you can keep it in the dock and relaunch it from there. And let's just take a quick look at the run through the demo itself. Dismiss that. So we have a top-level window within which we have some of the things you'd expect in a typical application, a toolbar with tooltips telling you what they mean, because sometimes they're not so easily interpretable. We have, this being an email application, we have a list of folders here on the left using a tree view. I'll talk about all these components in a bit. And then we have the message headers, we have the header for the current message, and then we have the message itself. And we can kind of move through these quite easily. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about is just how you can actually do some fairly important things very easily with the Java Desktop API. So, for example, JavaFX has something called WebView built in, and it's really easy here to, if you receive an HTML file as an attachment, to invoke WebView to be able to view that inline in the browser. And it doesn't have to be just an attached HTML file. It could be a link, right? So here there is a link being given. I can read. If I scroll down to the bottom, you will see controls. So if I click on something here, we can navigate, and that's all happening within the JVM, within the application, the JMail application. And as well as web content, we can do simpler content like text, a text attachment. And then there's images, which nothing too surprising, very common, but very easy to do. And we support a whole variety of all of the common image formats, which you can see listed here. And not just static images. We can also embed and support directly using JavaFX video. That's playing again in the VM. It's really easy to do with the controls of that. And then we have not just not just that kind of content. We could actually have Java content. So supposing somebody sends you a Java application as an attachment, then that we can handle that in line too, and you're able to interact with that and change it. And not just that one is a Swing JTable, but it doesn't have to be just Swing. We could have a JavaFX jar file application. This is a chart, and we can interact with that as well. And then we can move on to content types, which not all content types can be supported directly. So let's supposing you've got some PowerPoint and we can't handle that. It's really easy to just launch that in using whatever the desktop support for that is. And supposing you don't have PowerPoint, but at least you can view PDF, and the kind of person who sent you it has sent you a copy of that, you can look at that too. And on just going back to the toolbar, you can see that we're able to very easily compose a message, and we'll show you how we built this. That can also be accessed from this system tray here, where we can add common actions. We can, of course, reply to the message as well. And you can print. And all of these things are really easy to add to the desktop application. Oh, and I should have mentioned that, as you know, all of these actions here that similarly to the actions that we were launching in the external application that we didn't support directly, supposing we have the links can, as well as being embedded, displayed embedded in the application, we can also launch the external application to handle those too. So here I'm launching the platform browser, Safari. For the text, I could launch the platform text editor. For what's next? For the image, I can launch the platform image viewer. For the video, I can just click on that and launch the platform video player, which is QuickTime on Mac. Okay, so I think that's covered all of the important aspects of the demo. Now I'm going to return, if I can, to my slideshow. Okay, so having demoed that, we're going to show you how to develop this application. We'll help you navigate through the JavaDoc documentation to actually find how to the controls that we use to build the application. We'll show you how you can easily mix JavaFX and Swing, and then we'll show you how to use some of the powerful UI controls that are built in order to do some of the things that we showed in that demo. And then we'll show you how to deploy it. And we're hoping that the takeaway will be able to apply this yourself to build your own application for whatever your own use case is. So the first thing we saw come up was a splash screen. Splash screens are useful for many applications because they need to do database connections or something in the background, and you can get a very instant response from the JVM putting up a splash screen before it starts running the application, and the user knows that the thing's up and running and doing whatever it does. And you can embed that within a jar file as well as on the command, put it on the command line, and you can provide multiple versions which are named using this convention of number %. And if you have a high DPI screen like a Mac Retina or something else, it will pick the one that's most appropriate for the resolution of your display. The splash is automatically hidden when the application displays its first window. And if you want to be then sophisticated and do something like I did here, which was to have then the splash fade out, you can use the splash screen API to achieve effects like that. So quickly just revisiting the top level window, hopefully my mouse appears here, but you can see that the top level window is a Swing JFrame. We use the Swing J toolbar for the toolbar there. The folder view is a JavaFX tree table view, which is embedded in something called a JFX panel from the JavaFX Swing interop module. And we'll talk about that in a bit. There is a JTable is used for the message headers. And then for To allow you to resize between these are split panes nested within each other. We have JPanel here with JLabel children, and a JEditor pane is used for the message body itself, and so forth. And there's a long list of all of the things we used here, which you can read later at your leisure. So just talking about the system tray notification, this is really easy to do. You call this API called system tray, get system tray, and to that you can add a pop-up menu with menu items, and you add, one of this composed new message. You just add that item and set up an action to respond to it, and you add this to the system tray, and that's all it takes. No platform programming involved, very simple. And the about handler I showed you, this uses a class called desktop, which is supported by a package called desktop lowercase. And there are handlers for all sorts of different events, and the about one is one of the most simple ones, and that's what I demoed for you. And you can see how easy it is to create any of the handlers. You just check whether it's a supported action, and then you set your about handler, and all mine did was display a swing J dialog with the information about the application. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Kevin Rushforth to take you through the rest of the presentation.
All right, thanks, Phil. Go ahead and continue from this point. So as Phil was mentioning and showing in the demo, we can mix JavaFX and Swing content in the same application. The way we do that is with two classes in JavaFX, JFX panel and Swing node. JFX panel, which we showed several examples of in our application demo, is how you take JavaFX content and show it in a top-level Swing window. So the main JMail application is a top-level JFrame, and any FX content inside that window is done using a JFX panel. JFX panel extends Swing's J component, and so you can use it anywhere you can use any Swing J component. You can embed it in a frame, you can put it in a split pane, which we showed. And the JFX panel contains all of the JavaFX content in a JavaFX scene. And so what you do to use this is you create the JFX panel, and then you create your FX content. In the case of this simple example, it's a button, but we obviously use more complicated content than that in the real app. And then we create a scene using that content, set it as the scene of the JFX panel, and now you have a J component that can be stashed in a Swing component somewhere. In this example here that you see in the code, we just put the JFX panel in a Swing component that's called Swing panel. If you have a top-level FX window, which is a JavaFX stage, you can also embed and display Swing content inside of that. We do that with Swing node, which is a JavaFX node, meaning it goes anywhere in the scene graph that any JavaFX node can go, and it contains a Swing J component. So the way you use it is you create your Swing node, and you can embed in that something as simple as a J button or a J label, or you can put a J panel in there and put any number of Swing objects inside that. The other place we used a window which is separate from the main JMail window is in the composition that Phil showed you. When you press the compose button, we actually pop up a JavaFX top-level stage. And so the composition window is made up of a couple of panels, and the first one you see along the top is a collection of buttons for sending, saving, and attaching. And then we have the mail to, from, CC, and subject line field where you can enter in the recipients and the subject of your mail. And then there's an HTML editor below that, which is a built-in FX component that gives you pretty standard layout features. We'll let you select paragraph styles, font sizes, colors, and then you have the editing window itself where you can enter the text. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the attachment types that we handled that Phil showed you. The simplest one being text. So when we see in our application a .txt file, a text file, all we do is we take that file, read it into a string, and then create a JText area out of that, which is a J component, and then we return that. So all of the attachment handlers expect to receive a J component that they then will display inline. Similarly for images, Java 2D has built-in image loaders for a variety of different image formats. You can load them in and then scale them down to fit in whatever area that you need. And so in our example, when handling the image attachment, in this case a JPEG, we just call image.io.read and get the image. And then in the paint method of the image panel, which is also a J component, we end up drawing that image using the scaled width and height that we want to render it. The media component is handled using the JavaFX media player and media view components. So when we see an MP4 attachment, we invoke this create media content method. It creates a media view. It also creates the set of controls that you saw and Phil demoed, which will allow you to play and pause your video. You can seek to a specific point in the video. It will show you the timestamp, and then has volume control. And then we wrap all that in the JFX panel, which we talked about earlier, and that's how we return something that you can add into the main application inline. Similarly for web, we use the JavaFX WebView component, and it can either take a file name and read that and display it inline, or it can take a URL, and Phil demonstrated both of those. And again, we wrap that in the JFX panel. Finally, and perhaps most interestingly, is if we have a jar file that has Java content in it, we have two subclasses, one for Swing, one for FX. And we first load that jar file, create a class loader and load the jar file, create an instance of that. And then if it's a Swing component, we end up creating a panel and setting the content that we read in from the jar file as the panel. And now all of a sudden you get a live application that runs and paints as it needs to. Similarly for JavaFX, the only difference here being is we wrap it in a JFX panel so that it then appears as a Swing J component. And then again, we load in the scene and attach it. And now we have a fully inline and active JavaFX application. As Phil also showed you, both for things we can't do inline, or even for things that you can but want to pop out into their own application, we support clicking on the attachment, and then we will handle them with some external application. In the case of the jar content that we just talked about in the previous slides, we end up launching a new version of the JDK, and we'll run that jar file directly in the new process, and so it will pop up a new window. In the case of other content, JPEGs, MP4s, PowerPoints, and so on, we end up using the desktop APIs to choose the right application for the platform. So if you're doing web content on a Mac, it'll pop up your default, which might be Safari. That same call on a Windows machine will pop up Microsoft Edge. So we showed you a lot of things in this demo. There's an awful lot of things, though, that you can do with JavaFX or Swing that we didn't show you. The first thing you could do that we didn't do much of, or didn't show you anyway, is you can customize the look and feel of your application using the Swing look and feels or CSS styling for JavaFX. We can do drag and drop, which we didn't show. It's very common in a mail app for attachments to drag and drop, but we didn't show that. You could also do things like custom cursors, animations, various graphics effects, and so on. Now that you have your application, what we'd like to do is show you how to deploy that. It's one thing to be able to run that as a developer on your local machine, but you'd like to be able to give it to other people and who can then download and run the application. Phil showed initializing this application and running it using a Mac DMG file. Well, the way we do that is using the JPackage tool. JPackage will create a platform native version of your application. Before you do that, however, you need to have a JDK. Because we want to do both Swing and JavaFX, we have to create a JDK that has both in them. So we download JDK 19, we downloaded JavaFX 19, and then we run the JLink command that you can see there in the bottom of the slide to create a custom JDK that has both. Now we take that JDK and our application that we've built, and we package it up into a native platform installer. And the way we do that is by giving the JPackage options that you see there. You point to your main program, you point to the JDK that you want to use, and then you tell it where to put your file, and it will create the default package type for that platform. On Mac, it's a .dmg file that Phil showed you. On Windows, it would be a .exe, and in both cases, you just double click on it, and it works just like any application you might expect to download. You can also customize it to do other things that give you even better desktop integration. So for example, on Windows, you can add an entry into the Windows menu or a shortcut on your desktop. And in both cases, you can specify icons to use to give it a better look and feel. And there are a lot of other platform-specific options, and you can refer to the package documentation, JPackage documentation, included with JDK 19. So we don't have time to do this right now, but I would invite you at your leisure to go back over the content now that you've seen how we did some of this stuff. You can go watch the demo of the JMail app, and now you'll understand how we did it, and you should be able to do that too. So we've covered how to build a modern desktop application and shown you that you can use both Java Swing and JavaFX. You're not limited to one or the other. We've shown you the desktop integration with features like the About menu, docking, and various other things you can do. And most importantly, we've shown you how to handle multiple content types, and then how to take your application and package it up so you can deliver it to your end users. And then we've given you some pointers to the documentation. Shortly after Oracle Cloud World and Java 1 of 2022, we expect to post some of this content that we've covered for you to review at your leisure on cr.openjdk.java.net. And so hopefully you now have the information you need to start building your own Java desktop UI applications using Swing and JavaFX. Thank you. We're happy to have talked to you today. And that's all we have. Thanks.